All right, we're live.
Emergency pod.
Cheers.
Careful,
It's
not
our
the microphone.
first Substack Live.
And if we're sitting weirdly close together, it's
not because we're married.
It's because the vertical video setting, we have to be
I
sat
actually think
incredibly
you're
close
off.
together.
Yeah,
We're
okay.
going back
There we go.
and check my glasses.
Right. Okay. So our first Substack Live, huge story in our household, as it's one that I've been covering for my entire reporting career, which has spanned about 15 years. We've been reporting the buildup to this moment, and that is the U.S. attack on Iran with the intention of regime change. So I was woken up.
Let me just set the scene. So there are only 3 occasions in our relationship where I've woken you up in the middle of the night, as all married couples would sympathise. One was the attempted assassination of President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania.
We were in Dubai then.
The second one was the attack on Venezuela, in
the kidnapping
of Maduro in Venezuela, which was a few months ago. And then this morning, because I got jet lag, I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning to read the paper and saw the alerts and woke you up. So that was setting the scene.
So we'd been expecting an attack on Iran from the U.S. and Israel, but the big thing being the U.S. has been involved from the beginning. Obviously, we saw a war between Israel and Iran in June of last year, the so-called 12-day war. The U.S. wasn't immediately involved. This time is different. Donald Trump announced that the intention of this Operation Epic Fury, is in fact regime change. And so I've been reporting on this all morning and been on various news channels. Now we are working to confirm whether or not the Iranian supreme leader, the Ayatollah, is in fact dead.
Okay, and we don't know that for sure at the moment. So let's start on the regime change thing, because we were talking about this morning, and it seemed to me that what was, other than the fact of the attack, what was new this time is that President Trump is specifically saying this is a chance for you, the Iranian people, to change your government, and you have to seize this opportunity, he said. And he also said the opportunity wouldn't come around again for a very long time. Mm-hmm. So this is really unusual. He's explicitly calling for regime change, something he's never done before. So as well as the fact of the attack, his language around what the point of the attack is really important.
And so we need to kind of go back in early January, when the Iranian people had risen up against the government, which has happened a few times. It's always been cracked down. The regime forces always crack down, and brutally so. This time, Donald Trump said that if they shoot their people, if they murder their people, if they execute their people, etc., that there will be consequences. And there was reportedly tens of thousands of people who were killed, protesters who were killed, even more arrested and sent to Evin prison, with reports of torture, and there have been executions after sham trials. And so essentially, Donald Trump threatened the Iranian regime. And ever since then, there's been protests of the diaspora outside of Iran in cities around the world, including Los Angeles, the one that we were covering. And people have said, Donald Trump, you're a man of your word, follow through. And so they've been expecting him to attack.
And he also said help is on the way, right?
Yes, he said help is on the way in January. And there was a big, because we've been here before, right? Not necessarily with Iran, but in the Middle East, when American presidents have drawn red lines, and then those red lines have been crossed by brutal dictators in the Middle East. And so this time, Donald Trump wanted to show that, I guess, he wasn't like Obama.
One of the things that's really unusual this time is that Iran itself has attacked a bunch of different Arab states, and it had previously, I think, launched a missile at Qatar previously, But this time around,
But it was pre-coordinated, right? Like
right,
they knew that it
it
was
was the
going to happen.
tit for tat thing. But I think this time around, something that's really struck us because we, until recently, lived there, is that there's been attacks on Dubai, on the United Arab
On
Emirates,
the airport.
yeah, including on the airport, and that a missile or a drone has hit one of the tourist areas of Dubai, the Palm. It's extremely unprecedented and something I think we thought would never happen. So, can you say a bit about why would the Iranians have attacked so many of the Gulf states who, at some level, they would have hoped would have been a moderating force, perhaps, on the Americans and the Israelis?
Well, I think the fact that they have in fact attacked somewhere like Dubai, the airport, and the Fairmont Hotel on the Palm, which is a tourist destination. There's quite a lot of Brits who live in Dubai. We'll get to this later. I'm curious what the British Prime Minister, who has sat this one out, is going to have to say about this. But the fact that they have gone forward and attacked allies is essentially game over.
It makes it very hard for them to, if they were thinking about clinging on to power in any way, it makes it incredibly hard for them to do so without any support from other countries in the Gulf, right?
Well, they weren't going to go down without a fight.
Yeah.
So this is them going down without a fight, which
Going
means
down
they're
with a
going
fight.
down
Yeah.
with a
Yeah,
fight,
with a fight.
rather.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they weren't going to go down without a fight. This is them going down with a fight, which means this is them going down. I think it's really key. The fact that they have attacked all of these countries in the region is an indicator that they recognize that this is the end for them.
Mm. So what happens now then? So we are, as we're recording this, the Reuters news agency is reporting that
ABC is now reporting that
and
President Trump says Ayatollah Khamenei is
right.
dead.
Okay.
Oh, look. Ayatollah Khamenei, one of the most evil people in history, is dead. This is not only justice for the people of Iran, but for all great Americans and those people from many countries throughout the world. That's it.
So it's
He's
a big
dead.
moment. Yeah. According to President Trump, he and Israeli sources, he is now dead in one of the first missile strikes this morning. Presumably was targeted on a location where they knew the Supreme Leader would be.
Yes. People have asked, why did they decide now? What was the turning point to decide now? And, there's some indication that they knew where Khamenei was, that they had gotten intel that they knew where he was, and that perhaps now or never, which is also, I think, reflected in Trump's language to the Iranian people, saying, okay, rise up.
Can you explain a bit about what the significance of that is? 'Cause obviously, as well as being the head of state, he's also a religious leader and the leader of a religion that is followed by the vast majority of people in Iran. He's the leader of the Shia Islam in Iran, right? So it's a death that goes beyond just being the head of state, and it's kind of complicated because of that, his status as the religious leader. Can you explain a bit about that for people?
So this is actually one of the reasons why this hasn't happened before. This is, until now, the reason why he wasn't hit, assassinated, killed until now was precisely because he's a religious leader. I'd had this conversation with officials from previous administrations. And so, because there is concern that it would be seen as a holy war and an attack on Islam.
And it's Ramadan.
And it's Ramadan, which we thought that perhaps they wouldn't do this during Ramadan. And I was texting with some Arab diplomat sources last week asking this, and they said it's not part of Donald Trump's calculation. And in fact, they were right, because it wasn't part of Donald Trump's calculation. It is Ramadan, and he's gone for it. I think, though, they are attacking other Muslim countries. The Iranians are attacking. Yeah. They've hit Riyadh.
Well, we don't know.
No, they've hit Riyadh.
Okay.
They've and the Al Arabiya has come out and said that the Saudis have said that they reserve the right to respond.
And Kuwait and Qatar and
Bahrain,
UAE.
Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, UAE. Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, reportedly has been supportive of the strikes, I was told by Arab sources.
Just say a little bit more about the kind of role of Shia Islam in Iran. So, is there any part of the Iranian population, would you say, who don't like the Islamic regime but are devout Muslims and would be troubled by the fact the Americans and all the Israelis have killed the leader of their religion in Iran? Or is that now a vanishingly small number of people? But how would you?
I mean, it is increasingly a smaller number of people because it turns out when you brutally massacre a large group of people, particularly young people, the next generation of your country, you're going to lose friends and followers and fans.
I guess what I'm asking is it's difficult to get a sense of how secular Iran has become, unless you've been there recently, because obviously a lot of what we see and hear on social media is young people, secular people, political opposition. They have
But it's
loud
also
voices.
a really young country.
Right.
So
And
the majority of the population is young.
And I guess that's why I'm asking if there is a rump of devoutly Islamic, probably older people who, even if they don't love the Islamic government, would be troubled about the fact that the head of their religious leader has been assassinated, effectively.
So I was speaking to someone who probably would fall into this group of being a devout Muslim, has worked with the regime before, but wants, loves America, loves American people, wants to be, free to roam the world and have good relations, particularly with the US, and had expressed a desire to see a Venezuela situation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's removing the Ayatollah, but I guess not necessarily killing him.
Yeah, and that's not
Like,
going
I
to happen.
think, like, calling for killing him is not, like, I think that's a difficult one to
But even
expect from people like that inside Iran.
under any scenario for Iran's future, there will be another Ayatollah, right? There will be another, even if there is a secular government in Iran, there will end up being another Ayatollah in
But the
Iran.
idea is for there not to be, because they don't want an Islamic republic. Like, that's what the protesters have been saying.
Right, but there would be a religious leader who wouldn't be part of the government, let alone the leader of the government, which is
Yes, of course there would be, it's like the Archbishop of Canterbury,
Mhm.
right? Yes, there would be a religious leader inside Iran because there are a lot of Muslims.
I guess
a
why
lot
I'm
of
asking
Shia
about it, we
Muslims.
were watching back in the UK we were watching a documentary about Tony Blair, which looked at Tony Blair's involvement in the Iraq War, and one of the big concerns of the British and others in the Iraq War was that invasion should not be seen as a war on Islam, and it should not be seen as an attempt to kind of demonize Islam or Muslims, but to be perceived as a war of liberation. And I guess there's something similar at play here, which is that I guess people want to end up in a place where Iran has a new government, certainly a secular government, and hopefully a democratic government. But that doesn't mean that Iran's going to stop being an Islamic country. It might even continue to have an Islamic majority, but it just wouldn't be. It will be an Islamic country more like Turkey, maybe.
Yes.
Or other.
It's not an Islamic republic.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Now, of course, the question of who comes next is a big question. The supreme leader is dead. He has been killed. He is dead. There were succession plans. We didn't actually know what those succession plans were necessarily because President Raisi was a favorite to succeed him, and he died.
And we also don't know
questions around whether he died or was killed.
We don't know if his son is alive because his son was also a potential successor, and we're not sure, I think, as of right now, as to whether he is.
I mean, we don't know who's still alive, period, right now. I mean, the idea, if it's regime change, the idea is to get rid of everyone so that the regime can't continue. I mean, they've said that they'll do everything they can. The people have to take care of the rest. But obviously, the more leadership is taken out, the more likely the people will be able to actually overthrow the regime and a transition comes in. I mean, it's all there's like we've been here before, but we also haven't. So,
Just talk a bit about the domestic political reaction here in the US, because I think what's really striking is like while military action is still underway, people, political leaders are kind of expressing solidarity, supporting American troops in action. But there is a lot of, not far beneath the surface, there's a lot of, um, there's just a lot of concern about what the end game would be here. And it's again, like the old Iraq question about you broke it, you fix it. No one is very sure, seems least of all President Trump, what the end solution is going to be. He doesn't know who the next government of Iran is going to be. He doesn't really know how that government is going to get put in place, although he's called on Iranians to rise up and put the government in place themselves. So the military campaign has begun, but it's not at all clear how it's going to finish, right?
yes, no, this is the beginning, and they've said no boots on the ground. American politicians definitely don't want boots on the ground. Obviously, um, Democrats are not happy that this military operation has kicked off without a vote in Congress. Um, so there's obviously a domestic fight that will begin once Congress is back in session next week. But I think it would take a lot for there to be boots on the ground in the US. I mean, in Iran.
But it wasn't. It was the Republicans and specifically President Trump himself who ran at the
Mm.
last election on specifically not getting involved in escalatory foreign wars. And yet here
There's
we are.
a Stephen Miller tweet that is going around that of where he said Kamala Harris will send your sons to war.
Yes. I mean, there was a line of attack they used against Liz Cheney all the time, wasn't it? They said Liz Cheney was a warmonger and her father was a warmonger, and they tried to portray the Democrats as people who wanted to admire America in endless forever wars. And yet here we are, which goes to show, a year is not a very long time in politics. And, the things Donald Trump campaigned on have come to look very different when he's actually in power.
Yeah. But also,
Or are we going to talk about why the UK is not getting involved?
yes,
You're very exercised about this. So the British government has said, Keir Starmer made a statement this morning, which I thought was quite. He was pushing the fact that the UK had been involved militarily, but only in, as he put it, I think, a defensive capacity. And I think this is what we were at a defense and security conference last week, and there was a lot of discussion about this, about what is the constraint on European governments, particularly on the UK, in kind of participating in strikes on Iran. And the UK government has legal advice that it would be illegal for them under international law to carry out offensive attacks on Iran. So the actual kind of bombing attacks and missile attacks. But it's wanting to make it clear, it seems to me, that it is involved in defensive roles, for its allies. And I guess that includes kind of air surveillance, signal intelligence, to defend other countries in the region, including Israel, right, which is not uncontroversial in the UK. The Gaza war has been extremely controversial there. The Labour government in the UK has paid a political price for being perceived to have not condemned Israel's activities in Gaza strongly enough. So there's something quite interesting going on in the UK on this that Keir Starmer wants, on the one hand, Americans to know that Britain has taken part in this to the extent of supporting its allies, including the US and by implication Israel, but it hasn't actually carried out any military strikes itself. Was that a fair summary?
yes. I mean, he's such a prosecutor, so I suppose I'm not surprised.
The Brits love a international lawyer. That's really
Yeah. So we have some people who have joined. Make sure that you ask questions if you have them. we would love to answer your questions.
So what happens next? What happens in the next 24 or 36 hours, do you think?
I mean, I think it's key, right? Because and that so the internet has been shut down, so it's difficult to organize when you can't communicate. However, there are people who have Starlink, and so videos have managed to come out, and people are celebrating in Tehran. People are launching fireworks, so they know that Khamenei is dead. Um, and so the question is, do they take to the streets and do they start taking over government buildings and do they, I think they're going to need to feel confident that there aren't going to be more bombings, right? Like you're not going to go pour into the streets if you think you're going to get accidentally bombed. So there's
So at
that.
some point, the Americans will announce a pause to the attacks, and then it's like over to you, people of
Yeah,
Iran,
presumably,
to rise up
presumably,
or not.
the Iranian regime is still currently actively seeking informants. So, because they know what I mean, Trump has announced regime change, and he's announced that the people inside the country have to do the regime
Yeah,
change. And so, I mean, I think
people
I,
have nothing to lose at this
yeah.
stage.
And the key thing is the reason why we got here, the reason why the Iranian regime stayed in power for so long was because of fear. They ruled by fear, and people feared them. But then they got to the point where they had no fear anymore because they had nothing to lose. Like what makes fear powerful? You fear losing something, whether that's your loved ones, your livelihood, your health, your life. So they reached a point where they no longer feared losing their lives.
But for the people at the top of the Iranian government, they still have a lot to lose. It seems to me that there's still, you know,
Because there's no off ramp for
10,000,
them.
50,000 senior people in the IRGC and the Iranian government who have to keep the government or flee or die. They have no other options. They have to try and keep the government going.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's how much will it take for the rest of the population to overthrow that quite small group of people now, actually.
Yeah.
A group of people who've now also lost quite a lot of their leaders. If if the supreme leader and many of the other senior leaders have been effectively taken out in the first 24 hours of these attacks, the government is kind of rudderless. So yeah, the next 24 hours are going to be critical. Watch this space.
Watch the space. Stay
Okay,
tuned to
thank you.
News with Suze. How do we stop it? Sorry, it's our first one.